If you want to be one of the 171,000 plus TSP millionaires, here's where I think you should start. But first, if we haven't met, my name's Brandon, and I help people avoid money mistakes that I made and share insights that I get to see from real millionaires whenever I build their financial plans. So if you want to become a millionaire, first off, I want to tell you, you do not have to do anything crazy. You don't need a bunch of wild investments, anything like that. Plain old, boring, but very, very steady TSP is how over 171,000 people and counting have become millionaires. Now, that's pretty cool. And so that's something that anybody in the service can do if you take enough time and if you get started early. Now, luckily, the defaults and everything are much better than they were back in the day, but I can show you a few tweaks that will make your personal default even better. So first, let's talk a little bit about the history of the TSP and where defaults used to be. So the TSP, or Thrift Savings Plan, is basically the military's version of the 401k. Now, back in the 1900s, service members didn't even have access to the TSP. And then we got access to the TSP, and then they came out with the Roth TSP, even better. And so now we have that as an option. Now, the old default investment option for all TSP participants used to be the G Fund, which, yeah, the G Fund is okay if you're just looking to maintain your money and not lose money. It doesn't really grow. It more or less just keeps up with inflation. So if you want long-term growth, the G Fund, it ain't your fund. But luckily today, the current default is 5% into the traditional TSP, and then it is put into the Lifecycle fund closest to your full retirement age. I think that is within the parameters a very good starting point. However, there are a few tweaks that I would make to make your default even better. So there's three main things that I would make a change to for the TSP. Some of these you have control over, some not so much. But the first thing is the TSP default should be going into the Roth. For most service members, you're probably in the lowest taxable income years of your life. And also, Roth is really good for retirement. So whenever I'm building financial plans for people that actually are millionaires, one of their biggest issues that they have is figuring out the taxes, because what happens with the traditional TSP or traditional 401k, you get a deduction today, but then it's pulled out as taxable income in retirement, versus the Roth TSP, where instead you're paying the taxes today and then pulling it out completely tax-free. Actually, it's not even counted in your income in retirement. That is a huge benefit. And that last piece of that is something that a lot of people miss. It's not counted in your adjusted gross income or modified adjusted gross income. And I know they are like, don't worry about alphabet soup. Just know that is a major benefit. And it's a huge difference than just having a lower or just having tax-free income, okay? So default, I would change it to Roth TSP at 5%. And then I would, because legally they can do this, I would change it to the match going into your Roth as well. But that would take action from the FRTIB, or Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board. They are the people that are in charge of all TSP matters. You don't have control over that, so just know that even if you put your money into the Roth, the match is going to go into the traditional, at least for the time being. The second thing that I would do, and this is something you can control, is I would set it for a Save More Later program. And so what that is, I got that name from the book Nudge. It's a great book talking about financial defaults and things like that. But what the point is, every time that you get a pay raise, if you bump up your TSP by 1%, even if you start at 5%, you'll be at 10, 15% before you know it. Now, if you could start at 10% or 15% or maybe even higher, that's even better. But if you're married, you've got kids, like that just might not be something that us enlisted folks can really do, at least to start. Now, you can at least start at 5%, and then every time you get a pay raise, bump it up. That is something I would highly suggest you do. And then the last thing, I would actually keep it exactly the same with defaulting into the Lifecycle funds. Now, the Lifecycle funds are a little bit misleading because the newest Lifecycle funds don't have any historical data because they're new funds. And so a lot of service members look at that and mistakenly think that those funds are not good performing funds. That's simply not true. All the Lifecycle funds are a mix of the G fund, your F fund, your C fund, your S fund, and your I fund. And so the underlying performance of those is what's going to dictate the performance of the Lifecycle funds. Now, there's actually 11 Lifecycle funds. You can get an extra finger. There's 11 Lifecycle funds. So there's a Lifecycle income fund, and then there's the Lifecycle 2030 through 2075 in 5-year increments. Now, every 5 years, a Lifecycle fund is retired and a new one is born. And so that starts this whole process over again. Now, these are professionally managed funds, and they are going to change their mix over time. So you can literally put your money into it and just leave it there until sometime later. And I would suggest leaving it in the Lifecycle fund as a default until you have a defensible argument for why you need to change it. I'm going to say that again. Leave it in the Lifecycle fund until you have a defensible argument, meaning you have data and figures based on your investment time horizon and your risk tolerance level. You don't need to be messing around with your TSP and moving it all over the place. I would actually just say, just don't do that. Just don't do that. You actually have much more influence over how much money you're putting into the TSP than anything else. And that's something you actually can control. You can't control the gains that you're going to get in there, but you can control how much money you have invested. Okay, so to recap, if you are going to set up what I think is the perfect TSP default, then you would put it at least 5% into the Roth TSP. You'll bump up your percentage every single pay raise by at least 1%, and you'll put it in a Lifecycle fund that is closest to when you'll reach full retirement age. So for most people, 65. And then let the market do the rest. You really don't have to do anything crazy. Investing can be extremely simple and extremely effective. And there's 171,000 and growing people that have used their TSP to become millionaires. And you can too.